All right, well, welcome everybody to 514 Church. Good morning and happy Sunday. As Bryce mentioned, we're going to kick off a new series today. This is a 4-week series. I hope that this series is going to be helpful as we go into the summer. And so the series, as you can see, is called Keys. And I just want you guys to think about keys for a moment and think about what the value of a key is, what the function of a key is. Everybody has them. They're important in our lives. But the value of a key is not in the key itself, as if just having possession of a key is important. The value of a key or the function of a key is that keys have the ability to open doors. And so you have a particular key, and that key has the ability to open a particular door. So I'm sure that you've had that experience where you've been locked out of something before, and the nightmares come flooding into our imagination right now. You're locked out of your house, you're locked out of a car, you're locked out of a place that you're supposed to be. And part of the frustration of this is that you're right there. Like you're at the place you're supposed to be. You're right there, but you can't go inside. And because you can't open the door and you can't go inside, whatever is behind that door is withheld from you. You don't have access to what's behind the door, even though you made the trip, even though you're there, even though you're where you're supposed to be. If the door is locked, you don't have access to what's behind it. I remember when I was a kid, my dad had two things that I kind of remember. He had a giant wallet, like he just had this thing stuffed full. I have no idea what was in it. A giant wallet, and he had this key ring that had like 1 million keys on it, like way too many keys. There were not that many doors in his life. He just had this giant, I don't know, he just like saved them or like was afraid to get rid of them. But then every once in a while, we still get locked out of something that we were supposed to get into. And I remember even as a kid, I would look at my dad and be like, how is this key not on that key ring? Like, I've never seen you use any of those keys. We need one key and you don't have it. And so this is a frustrating experience for us. Keys open doors that otherwise would be locked. And so over this series, over the next 4 weeks, we're going to share with you from our experience and our walk with God some keys to a life with God. Keys to a full life with God. Now, I'm not claiming that these 4 keys are the exhaustive list of all the keys that you need for all the doors that are in a life with God. But every week, we will share with you from our experience keys to particular doors that you might at this moment feel like you don't have access to, something in your life with God that you feel locked out of. And so I want to start with a little bit of a disclaimer, and of course this should go without saying, but I just want to ground us in this. The reason that we stand up here and the reason that we say and teach the things that we teach about Jesus is because we believe with no equivocation that the story of Jesus Christ revealed in the whole counsel of God, what we call the scriptures, is the true story of the world. We believe that this is real. Like, we don't just have faith or whatever that might mean. We believe that all of this life, all of this experience is grounded in the ultimate reality of God as expressed and displayed and revealed through Jesus Christ. We don't believe that this might be true of us, but this isn't true for everybody. We believe that this is ultimate reality. If what we're talking about, when I talk about keys, practical things, if we didn't think this was grounded in the real world, then what would I be giving you advice on? We think that this is real. You know, a life with God is possible because God is real. And what we say about him is real, like it is the fabric of reality. And so keys, which are real things, open doors, which are real things, and give us access to what's behind that door, which are real things. And so this is reality that we're talking about. We can have confidence that as we move into this and as we follow this and as we do these things, that something real can happen in our life, that these keys will actually work. Now, the flip side is important to consider as well. If you don't use these keys, if you don't lean into what we're talking about, then chances are the doors in your life with God that feel locked and shut will most likely remain locked and shut. And so if you find yourself frustrated in your walk with God at the moment, if it feels like certain doors are closed in your relationship with God, I believe that you can unlock these doors. You know, this life that we're living right now, This life of the Christian, the Christian life. We're not meant to wallow in sin with God very far away, and then every once in a while have a breakthrough where he comes near and then go back to this life of wallowing with God far away. We are meant to dwell richly with God. That is the reality that is promised to us, and it's possible, but you have to use the keys. You've been there before. You can't just stand in front of the locked door and wish that it weren't locked. You have to take the key that unlocks the door, put it in the keyhole, turn it, open the door, and then you have access to what's behind it. Now, because what we're going to talk about over these next 4 weeks are typically things that you are to do, we really have to be comfortable with the framing of all of this. Because when I talk about spiritual disciplines, it's very easy to start to think of these things like a to-do list, right? Like this is homework from God, and you're going to get graded on whether or not you do them or how much of them that you do. So let me say this, and then we'll begin. This life is not a test to see how good you are at being a Christian. And this life the point is not to see how much Christian stuff, how much Christian activities you can have in this life. The foundational element of beauty in this life is the inexplicable reality that we can know God, that we can be with him, that we can walk with him, that we can really abide in his presence. And these keys can unlock that door and lead you into that reality for real. And so keys open doors. And today, we're going to open the door that is intimacy with God. And so this is something that many in our modern day find difficult. True relationship with God, where he's with us and we are with him. A dynamic and personal relationship where we walk with him and we feel his presence. A comfortable relationship where we speak with him freely and frequently. I want this door to be open for us. And this week, the key that I'm going to give you is meant to access what's behind this door. Today's key, and what I want to begin this series with, is this. To unlock the door of intimacy with God, we have to live from his feet. Live from his feet. This is the starting point. And every wonderful possibility of the Christian life begins here. Now, the hero or the example of this key is a woman from the Gospels named Mary of Bethany. And so Mary of Bethany, in terms of the heroes of the biblical story, this Mary tends to be somewhat obscure. But I actually believe that perhaps she is the example that all of us need to go back to and start with. There's a famous story. If you grew up in church, you've probably heard this story before. It's the story of Mary and Martha at their house in Bethany. And so this is Luke chapter 10, 38 through 42. As Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. And she had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. And she came to him and asked, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? Tell her to help me." "Martha, Martha," the Lord answered, "you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her." And so let's set the scene. Jesus, at this point in his ministry, is a revered prophet, teacher, and quite frankly, the potential Messiah. This is what people are saying about him. And he comes to Bethany, and there's two sisters, Mary and Martha. This is Martha's house. She opens the house for him, but her sister Mary is there, and Martha is being hospitable. Think about what it takes to have people over to your house, right? She's preparing the house. She's probably cooking food, cleaning up, and she's taking seriously the gravity of the guest that she's about to host. And her sister Mary is just sitting there, sitting at the feet of Jesus, listening to him, enamored by his words and his presence, but also not helping. And so Martha, quite understandably, I might add, gets upset and asks Jesus, who she looks at as an authoritative figure, "Don't you care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? Tell her to help me." And so many of us can relate to this if you grew up with siblings or you have some kind of family dynamic. One time over Christmas break when I was in college, I was home with my 2 older sisters and my younger brother. My oldest sister's name is Carrie, and she is very much the stereotype of the older sister. And so she's like helpful, concerned, conscientious. And my other sister, Colleen, is very much a middle child. So I'll let you use the adjectives there. And we're preparing for Christmas, or should I say that my mother is preparing for Christmas. And my mom's out running errands, trying to get things ready, and she calls the house phone. And my oldest sister, Carrie, answers the house phone. And it's pretty clear that they're having an anxious conversation where my mom is strategizing with Carrie, right? What needs to be done, when it needs to be done, who needs to do it. And Colleen and I are sitting on the couch watching Saturday Night Live reruns. And this is when Saturday Night Live was actually funny. And I will never forget this because of how inappropriate it is, right? Here's 2 people trying to be helpful and help do something important like Christmas. And my sister yells from the couch while Carrie's on the phone with my mom, Carrie, tell mom not to ask me to do anything. And I think this is very funny. My mom and my sister did not think this is funny. And they still don't really think this is funny. But it kind of has gone down in our family lore because it is such a picture of the relational dynamics that you see in my family. And so you understand the frustration of Martha, right? I mean, we at least get where she's coming from. But Jesus' response to her is curious. You know, he says to her, Martha, Martha, you are worried about many things, but few things are needed, indeed only one. And Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken from her. And so many sermons have been preached, and much ink has been spilled on this brief passage. And I think that's because of what I just described. There's something human about it. There's a family dynamic that's relatable. We understand it, we can feel it, and so it connects with us. Now, the takeaway that I typically hear from this is basically the lesson is that you're supposed to be like Mary, you're not supposed to be like Martha, right? So be like Mary, don't be like Martha. I think that there was a famous book or a book that got some kind of clout a while ago called How to Be Mary in a Martha World. And so I think that this is a good instinct because Jesus certainly offers a corrective to Martha. But when you look at the story and you look at what Martha's doing, like she's not doing anything bad, right? In fact, I would argue that she's doing something good. She's preparing for Jesus. She's doing things for Jesus. And it seems like her motivation for doing what she's doing is pure. She reveres this man. She calls him Lord. This is Jesus of Nazareth, a prophet mighty in word and deed. So far in the Gospel of Luke, he's been healing the sick. He raised a boy from the dead. He calmed the storm on the Sea of Galilee. He casted out demons. He's fed thousands with a few pieces of bread and a couple fish. And so they know who this is. They know who he might become. And Martha is putting forth effort for him. Now, you think about the things that we emphasize at this church, right? We have a teaching ministry here, and one of our emphases, one of the things that we want to do is we want to paint a clear vision of the Christian life. We want to give you handles for a life with God. We do not want your faith to be this thing where we say a prayer so that we can go to heaven instead of hell when we die, and then every once in a while we show up to church. We want this church to understand that the reality of the Christian faith is that through your faith and faithfulness, so through your beliefs and your actions, you have the ability in your life right now to be transformed into the image of God, into the image of Jesus. You have the ability right now to become something and bring something into the world, something real. You can build for the kingdom of God in this life. You can build eternal things, things that will never rust or spoil or fade in this life. And so even according to us and the way that we talk about this, in our lives as Jesus followers, we must be like Martha. We must do things in the name of Jesus. We must act and build and live obediently for him. And so the lesson cannot be, don't be like Martha. We must be like Martha. So what's the lesson? What's being shown to us here? I believe that if we think about it a little bit of a different way, what this is showing us is this is showing us a proper sequence. This is showing us the sequence to a life with God. It is not Mary, not Martha. I believe what's being shown to us in this passage is that it's Mary before Martha. We have to be Mary before we can be Martha. Martha is doing for Jesus. Mary is sitting at his feet, relishing in his presence and knowing him. Our lives as Christians, which will include actions that build for the kingdom of God, can only be launched from a place of intimacy with Jesus. We have to be with him first. And then it's from his presence that everything else in your godly life might flow. There's a book by Samuel Whitfield that I read this year. I've been recommending it to everybody. It's called Discipleship Begins with Beholding. So think about that. Discipleship, which is what we're all claiming to be, discipleship begins with beholding. It is not that discipleship is just beholding. It's that it begins with beholding. John Mark Comer, who architected this thing called Practicing the Way, which is becoming very influential to me personally and on our staff, he paints the picture like this. The life of a disciple goes like this: be with Jesus, become like Jesus, do what Jesus did. So you see the sequence. Be with him, then we become like him, and as we become like him, we do what he did. To be with him is the first step. This is the launching point. And I believe that this is where it must begin. When the disciples asked Jesus how to pray, he gives them what we call the Lord's Prayer, but this is a model for how our prayer life should be. And how does the Lord's Prayer begin? He says, "Our Father in heaven, holy is your name." That's the beginning of the prayer. The prayer that Jesus has given to us, the Lord's Prayer, does not begin by asking for something or by doing something. It begins by looking at someone. This is what Mary gets right. There's a lot to do, and she knows this. There's a story about her later where she does something so beautiful for Jesus that he says her story must be told anywhere the gospel is told. So it's not that she doesn't do anything. It's that she begins in the right place. She says, look, he's here. I'm not going to miss this. I'm not going to miss him. I will sit in his presence. I will sit at his feet, and I will look at him, and I will hear him, and I will be with him. Mary's life, like anyone who's a part of the Church of Jesus Christ, will have much to do. But first things must be first. Be with Jesus. That's where it starts. Now, this is the relational aspect of faith that I think we, in our expression of Christianity, ironically get wrong. If you grew up in any kind of evangelical space in the U.S., you've heard this catchphrase, and you're going to be able to finish it for me. Christianity is not a religion, it's a relationship, right? It's not a religion, it's a relationship. But relationships are a certain thing. Relationships require certain things. And one of the things that relationships require is presence and proximity. You think about marriage, right? In marriage, we live together, we sleep together, we run errands together, we have conversations together. We are very, very often with each other. It's really almost too silly to paint a hypothetical picture of a marriage where these things don't happen, right? It's taken for granted. I'm married to her, and so I spend time with her. It's not even a requirement of marriage. It's part of the very definition of that particular relationship. And so I do think that we throw around, phrases a lot. This is one of the problems with kind of like being catchphrasy about our faith, is that we throw around like it's not a religion, it's a relationship. And then most of the time we turn around and treat it exactly like it's not a relationship. We totally forget this part. We read about how Christ is the bridegroom and we are the bride. And so our covenant is a marriage covenant, but then we forget to do one of the very things that must happen for it to be a marriage. We forget to be with God. And so God is here. He is available. We can sit at his feet. We can be proximate with him. We can be present with him. James, the brother of Jesus, writes in James 4:8, come near to God and he will come near to you. Draw near to God and God will draw near to you. This is a promise, right? There's a reality in redemptive history where we stand right now, where God has moved heaven and earth for you. So he's available. He's here. He's ready for you. That's not the question. The question has to do with us. According to James, your proximity to God, your intimacy with God is up to you. He has moved. He has made it available. He is standing there. His arms are open. The grace of God has come into your life. The kingdom is here. The king is here. Forgiveness is available. Reconciliation is available. Adoption is available. Are you available? This is the question of the Christian life. Now, I know this sounds like I'm challenging you, but I actually say all of this to encourage you because I sit with people in this church a lot. And one of the main emotions that I feel with people about their walk with God is frustration. Many people are frustrated in our lives with God. He doesn't seem near. You know, like we worship him, we come here, we put our hands in the air, we pray, we're part of a church, but like, where is he? How do I unlock his presence? And so the first key is to be like Mary of Bethany. We must arrange and orient our lives in such a way where we consistently look at him and where we are consistently with him. And here's why this is actually encouraging. If you do this, it will happen. God jealously desires you. He longs for you. He yearns for you. If you put yourself in his presence, if you pay attention to him, he will be there. Song of Songs 4:9. You have stolen my heart. This is the bridegroom to the bride. You have stolen my heart, my sister, my bride. You have stolen my heart with one glance of your eyes, with one jewel of your necklace. So the bridegroom, Christ, says to the bride, which is us, the church, you have stolen my heart with one glance of your eyes. And so what happens when we pay attention to him? What happens when we look at him? What happens when we open space for him? He shows up because with one glance of our eyes, his heart is captivated. And a life of meaning and purpose will flow from this. But I want to say something black and white here because I want us to really understand the stakes. You cannot live for God if you don't know him. Doesn't mean you can't do good things in the world without knowing God. People do good things in the world all the time. It's part of the common grace of God. The sun shines on the wicked and the righteous. But you can't truly build things in his name and for him if you don't know him. And how can we know him if we're never with him? You know, I think that this is what Jesus is getting at in that scary moment at the end of the Sermon on the Mount. This is one of the parts that we don't love to talk about so much. It talks about the judgment day. It's Matthew 7:22-23. He says, many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name? And in your name drive out demons? And in your name perform many miracles? And then I will tell them plainly, I never knew you. Away from me, you evildoers. And so what I find interesting about this is they come to Jesus and they say, well, look at all the things that we did. Wasn't that good? Didn't we do good things? And Jesus doesn't say, no, you're lying. You never did any of those things. You never did those good things. He purely puts it in a relational context. He just says, I didn't know you. I never knew you. You claim you did these things in my name and for me, but I don't know you. To know God is the foundation. I went to a conference in New York City, and a pastor named John Tyson, who I'll quote here in a moment again, he pointed to this verse, and he said, so don't get mad at me, he said it. He said, according to Jesus, impact without intimacy is evil. We have to know God. Everything that we do has to flow from him. The reality of him, not the idea of him, not a thought or a belief that there are certain propositional truths that you agree with. We have to know him, be with him, and then the life that we're promised, the life of impact, the life of building, the life of things that will be raised from the dead and last forever, they come from that. And so here's the thing. Anybody can do this. You have the key, and you can open the door, and behind that door is God, and he will show up, and he will be there, and you will come to know him. Over the last year, my life has been completely turned upside down by this key. And so I've been following Jesus for years. I've been a pastor at a church for years. Over the last year, everything is different and nothing is the same for me. And what I'm doing and the practice that I have to sustain this is not revolutionary and it is not heroic. And so I'll tell you what I do. This is what I do. So this is not necessarily a prescription. This is an example of something that has happened to me. And this is my non-negotiable. So I wake up an hour before I have to do anything or go anywhere. So no matter what that means, like that's the part about it that's hard, right? Sometimes that means 5, it's not that fun. Sometimes that means 4, that's really not that fun. And when the alarm goes off, I don't always want to get out of bed, but I believe in this so deeply, and it has affected me so profoundly that I do not allow myself to negotiate with myself. And so I wake up every morning an hour before I have to do something, and the only thing that I've made like structure is that I read 5 Psalms every morning. So if you read 5 Psalms a day, every month you'll go through the whole book of Psalms, right? 150 Psalms. 5 Psalms a day. This is the prayer book of the Bible. And I don't just like read it, but I pray it to God. I pray his word back to him. And I'm in conversation with him and I ask him, if I read something and I'm like, what is that? I ask him about it. I say, I don't understand this, show me more. Or if I read something about his love that I just can't possibly fathom is true, I say, thank you for your love. Will you show me more? Will you let me experience this? I speak it back to him. Then, this doesn't take an hour. It takes like 20, 25 minutes. And then the rest of that time, the only thing that I do is something that puts me into the presence of God, something that draws me near to God, because James promised if I do that, God will draw near to me. So sometimes I listen to worship music. God is enthroned on the praises of his people. And so music is powerful. It does something. It's real. It manifests something. The presence of God often rides in on the chariot of worship and praise. So sometimes I do that. Sometimes I just sit and I'm quiet. You imagine that? Just have a moment in your life where it's just like quiet and I just say, like, if there's something that you want to say to me, then say it. Now, I understand that what I'm describing sounds an awful lot like something that we all know, which is called quiet time. You guys know about quiet time, right? In the Christian world, many people try or have tried to start their days with quiet time. And so I just want to make a distinction here. This is what John Tyson said. Joel sent me this Instagram clip, and I don't have Instagram, so it's difficult for me to look at it on my browser. And so I'm paraphrasing, okay? John Tyson talked about this just last weekend. He said, the invitation is not to get up in the morning out of obligation, even though you don't want to, and read a boring book that you don't want to read, and say a few words to a God that you can't see, and then hope that he blesses you with a good day. This tends to be something like what we experience, and then we wonder why we can't sustain this practice. If that is how we see it, if that's how we experience it, we can't sustain the practice because that's dismal and bleak. Why would you want to sustain that practice? How is that helpful? That's not what Mary's doing. She's enamored with Jesus. He is actually there, and she is actually there. And Jesus is happy that she's there. One of the things that Jesus is saying, he's speaking to Martha, but he's also speaking to Mary in this moment. One of the things he's saying to Mary is that I'm happy you're sitting here. I'm happy that you're here. C.S. Lewis says that we are not merely tolerated by God, we are ingredients in the divine happiness. God is glad when you sit with him. God is glad when you're with him. It makes him happy. You can, in these moments, really be with him. And in these moments, he will really be with you. The invitation is to sit in the presence of God, who is real, a God who desires you and delights in you, and to feel his presence and his glory, and to be with him and delight in him for real in this world right now. Have you ever, maybe you have this practice as a parent, maybe you've heard of this practice, where parents take a day or an evening and they just are with one of their kids, right? It's like date night with your daughter or with your son, or just a day where you focus on them. These moments are holy and impactful, and we remember them as children. You know, dad camp is powerful for many reasons, but like one of the most simple things about dad camp is you take a dad and he takes one of his kids and he's just with that kid for a whole weekend uninterrupted. It doesn't happen very often. And when it does, you know, the father delights in the child delights in the father. When this happens, it matters. And we remember these moments of presence. These moments of presence are impactful. And I believe this is what our time with God can be like. One time when I was a kid, you know, I was one of four, like I said earlier. And so these moments with my parents were difficult to come by because there were just too many of us. Like a limited amount of parents and like lots more children. But I remember when they happened. I'm 36 years old. I remember them. When I was 6, so 30 years ago, my dad put me on the back of his motorcycle and didn't tell me where we were going. And he drove all the way to Cleveland to Jacobs Field, and we went to an Indians game. I remember that moment. I remember that whole ride. I remember that whole day vividly today, now. Just me with him, for real. That's the invitation that's at hand when we sit at his feet and when we sit with God. For me, I want this. I have to have this. And so this is where I start. Throughout my days, sometimes I have time. And so I'll pray for other things and I'll do other things and I'll try to build for the kingdom of God and I'll be obedient in my actions and I'll pray for the church and I'll pray for revival and I'll pray for healing. And sometimes I have time and I get to that and I do, but that's not where I start. I don't start at those things. I start with him. At least I try. Just being with him in his presence, looking at him with love, being looked at with love, looking at him so that his face might shine upon me. And so I would urge us to use this key. Don't sacrifice this. Don't sacrifice this part of your relationship. If it feels like the wheels in your life of following God are spinning, I would almost guarantee that at least some of it comes back to this. This is the Mary of Bethany practice, to sit at the feet of God, because I believe that this is the key. That life with God begins with being with him, that discipleship, which is all of our call, begins with beholding, and that a life of doing what Jesus did in his name begins with being with him. And so I want to unlock that door for us. I want to sit at his feet. I want to be with God. And so what we're going to do here for the next 5 minutes is we're just going to be quiet. And we're going to sit. And for real, we're going to look at God. Not theoretically. We're going to turn towards him and look at him. Invite his presence. Ask for him to show up. Look towards him. Just sit and be with him like sometimes you just sit and are with the people that you're most intimate with. Look at God. And so I'm going to pray for us, and then I'm going to stand up here, and every once in a while I might lead us into something. But I want us to just sit and to be with God. God, we ask for you in this moment that you draw near to us. You promise that when we draw near to you, you will draw near to us. And so we are here right now, the best of our ability, trying to draw near to you. So we ask that you're faithful and that you come near. We want things from you, and we need things from you. And we understand that the gravity of a life following you requires us to do things, but we have to start with you, and we want to start with you because we want you. We want to be with you. We want to be near with you. And so, God, let us experience that right now.